Hello and welcome to another Daily Devotion as we talk about war and peace in Scripture. And of course in the book of Ecclesiastes it says in the 3rd chapter, there's a time for war, a time for peace. It's a time to take life, time to refrain from doing so. And boy, there's a ton of questions around that. We're not talking about euthanasia or an abortion today or capital punishment or anything like that. All those are moral questions about taking life as well and what God would have us to do. But in this case, fighting war, which in the 10 Commandments, the word for killing is premeditated murder, not taking a life in war, which has a different Hebrew name. And so I pose a challenge or a question to you today. You know the parable of the Good Samaritan. Well, you know, as the story goes, the Samaritan, an enemy of the people of Israel, comes along and sees a Jewish man who's been beaten and left for dead in a ditch after he's been robbed. And the Samaritan goes and cares for him, puts him on his donkey, anoints his wounds with oil, pays the innkeeper to house him for however long his recovery and medical bills will cost. Pretty generous for an enemy. But I was once posed the question, as we're talking about when do you have to fight? Do you ever have to fight and kill in order to love your neighbor? And you know, the classic example is World War II. And if we hadn't gotten involved in World War II, would we all be speaking German? Would the Jewish people be eradicated? You know, where concentration camps continue and genocide. And so was the response to do nothing or to intervene, even if it meant killing others, because the cost of not doing something was too great? So the hypothetical question that was posed was, if the Samaritan had come down the road while the bandits were still wounding and slashing and beating him, whether they killed him or not, what would Jesus have said in that moment? What is a loving response when somebody is wounding your neighbor or a family member? And in those moments, are we called to go to war, to kill? Tough question. Really tough question. So many soldiers are told, those are their orders. This decade we're fighting Vietnam. This decade we're fighting Korea. This decade we're fighting Germany and Japan. The Axis powers. Who will it be 10 years from now? The players change on the world scene. But the poor sons and daughters who fight the battles, are they affected deeply by the wars? Not unless they're being invaded. They're just told to go who to point the rifle at when they're there. So while politicians might send everybody to fight, the real cost of war is paid by those who bear it, and civilians who are torn by it, those who lose their sons and daughters by it. And so I can't help but thinking that the world might be a lot better place if we might seriously ask the questions, if we're called to fight, who, why, and in light of who we are as God's children, are we still obedience to God, obedience to the state? Is this a justification for war? I had a ethics professor in seminary who had a poster on his wall and it said, "A modest proposal for peace. Let the Christians of the world agree, finally, to stop killing each other." And then he had another little mini one that said, "Wouldn't it be great if the Navy had to hold a bake sale to raise funds for one of their newest bombers, while the churches didn't ever have to worry about funding the ministries and missions of God?" Ironic humor that really has a punch underneath it. We're a violent people, and I fear we rush far too quickly to kill our enemies before seeking to understand them. Is there a time for war in love of our neighbors? There very may well be, but none of us should be eager to go running off to fight it without first asking, how will this affect us as people of God.